Let's get the views now of one of the most respected journalists in the country, and what a thrill to be reunited with the former political editor of The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh. Trevor, what a delight to have you on the programme and to see you again. I'm not one to gloat, I'm not one to wag my finger, but I read your columns in the run-up to the last election. Unfortunately, we knew this would happen. It's been all too predictable. Arguably, things are worse than you might have even feared, Trevor.
They are indeed, and I think we both forecast that this would happen, but it's in fact worse than even the worst we predicted. And sadly, I have to tell you, it's not going to get any better. I think that some of the questions you raised during your preamble here on what's going to happen next is that we're going to see a lot more of the sort of things that enraged the British public, who mistakenly voted for a Labour government after 14 years of Conservative chaos. And I think that one of the things you also mentioned was, will reform under Nigel Farage be able to put it back together? Well, whatever happens, I think the election of reform is now set in stone, simply because as the mood of the public was in July of last year, they are going to be absolutely fed up to the back teeth with Labour. I fear that they're not going to go towards the Tories. And I think that the momentum of reform is now unstoppable. And when you get to the situation where Labour is commanding the respect of just 1 in 8, 13% of the voting public, then I think they are dead men walking.
Are you surprised that Sir Keir Starmer has not pivoted at this stage? Because this is not a guy who historically, Trevor, has stuck to his principles.
Well, he doesn't have any principles, and as for pivoting, which way is he going to pivot? His natural inclination is to be as left-wing as the woke Labour government, the trade unions. I mean, woke isn't really any longer a strong enough term for the way that the left of centre regards Britain today. They detest the way of life which was normal, the British way of life, which was normal until very, very recently, and especially July the 4th last year. They want to end it. They want to see the back of normal, common decency between people who are elected and people who elect them. And I think that the disintegration of law and order, not just major crime, which is on the rise, I believe, anyway, despite the figures suggesting otherwise, you only have to walk the streets of London to see evidence of it.
Yeah.
I think that it's not just that. It is the disintegration of norms which were polite society, the ability of people to get along together instead of actually being aggressive to one another in public. Those are lines which are going to be very difficult to redefine and reintroduce under any government, whether it's Reform, the Tories, but certainly not Labour.
Are we being a little unfair on the Prime Minister, though, looking at it from the other point of view, Trevor? The migrant crisis inherited the illegal migrant crossings in the Channel, unchecked legal mass migration, a tanking economy, the deficit, the woke takeover of our public institutions, the cost of net zero. This is all gifted to this new government by the Conservatives.
Well, all of that is true, but I don't think we're being unfair to Keir Starmer and his Labour government. You said earlier that he was a liar, which he is, and demonstrably and provably, but you said he wasn't stupid. Well, despite the fact that he's a KC with a good law degree, you can also be stupid. You can be stupid as well as clever, and you can be clever in the wrong way. And I think that, in fact, he's not even proving to be clever as a Prime Minister and a leader of this country. I think that in so many provable and demonstrable ways, Keir Starmer is leading us off a cliff edge. And I think, and I fear, that it may be irreparable, whoever wins power and by whatever majority they win it.
Do you see Starmer surviving to fight the next election, Trevor?
The tradition of the Labour Party is never to get rid of its leader, no matter what sort of dire circumstances they lead them into. Neil Kinnock remained leader right through the catastrophic 80s and into the beginning of the 90s. And I think that no matter what they do, I mean, even Jeremy Corbyn remained leader until the election crashed him. He had to go then. But while they're in office, I think it's very difficult to get rid of them. And I suspect that he will limp on as he realizes that indeed Angela Rayner, who is surely the front runner for any succession, would be even worse.
It's a very, very good point. And I think Labour most definitely in the absence of Starmer would doubtless shift left. That is inevitable. Trevor, the country's in a febrile position at the moment. Can you think back to a time in your political reporting when we've been this divided, this anxious, this angry?
Yes, I can. When I think the 1970s, the winter of discontent, all of those historic periods were dangerous and angry and sulphurous. But there was always someone on the sidelines waiting to come in and do the job properly. There was a sort of system by which you had the Labour government in power under Wilson and Callaghan or previous prime ministers, and the pendulum would swing after they'd put the country into economic hardship back to the Conservatives who would restabilise it. But that system has now disappeared, and it isn't automatic to assume that someone will come riding to the rescue at the next election, despite the fact that Nigel Farage has this huge apparent majority of voters at the moment. He's very inexperienced, if not totally inexperienced, in running a country. He's learning on the job in the local authorities, where I hope he's going to do a good job and prove that he can actually run a country and establish a cabinet which will deal sensibly with the problems of this country, which, while enormous, would not be incurable if you had a government with some sort of authority to deliver its mandate.
Trevor, we know about the anger around migrant hotels. They are a blight on communities. It's the loss of a focal point in a town or city. And people are likely going to be protesting this weekend. Is there a danger that hard left activists will seek to disrupt and probably to a degree dilute the narrative and cast everyone as far right?
That's been the policy so far for the last several years, not just under this particular government. The leftists and Labour particularly has always regarded anyone on the right of centre as Tory scum. So that sort of language and that sort of incitement, in my view, to violence is inevitably going to lead to sort of problems we have talked about there. The thing is that High Court ruling on the hotels and asylum seekers in hotels has, I think, for the first time, given the ordinary silent majority, non-partisan members of the community a voice, a focus, something which has not been there before. They've been individual. They haven't been a group. They haven't been coordinated, and yet this has, for the first time, given them something to unite around. People who have never met one another will actually turn out around these hostels and protest against it. And I think that this is something that the Labour government is going to be very, very alarmed by, because this is a legitimate uprising by that silent majority.
Meanwhile, the unions continue to flex their muscles. And as I mentioned in my earlier preamble, Trevor, very difficult for Labour to stand up to the unions, given that they're bankrolled by them and represent their political constituency. So my question to you is, Rachel Reeves, under pressure probably to settle some of these wage demands. She can't be long for this world politically, can she?
The same thing applies to Rachel Reeves as it does to Keir Starmer. They are clinging to one another like straws for a drowning man. The point is, they might as well pay these pay demands now, because they will eventually, and it will save all the strife that we're going to go through on the tubes and with the doctors and nurses. The unions are in control of the Labour Party. Not only are they in control of the Labour Party, most of the Labour Party MPs sympathise with the unions. They believe that they're hard done by, despite the fact that between them, public sector workers are paid an enormous £240 billion a year. That's on the latest figures, which I think are probably overtaken already. They also draw huge pensions, and the pension liability that this country, the taxpayers of this country, face over the future decades is an unbelievable close to £3 trillion, which will have to be paid one way or the other as those pensions fall due. We are feather bedding the millions of workers who probably wouldn't get a job outside the public sector and yet are feather bedded by the taxpayer.
Trevor, I've been watching and you on the media for many years, reading your columns for decades. Fantastic to see you again, and thank you for joining us on Talk. My thanks to the former political editor of The Sun newspaper, one of the most not just respected journalists in the country, but influential as well. And that is the headline from Trevor Kavanagh, is that a reform victory in 4 years' time is now, and I quote, set in stone. OK, the political Nostradamus that is Trevor Kavanagh has predicted that Nigel Farage will be our next Prime Minister.